Janine, thank you so much for being here today. For the audience, am Amy Hamilton, and I publish the Project Manager, Life is a Project, as well as the Consummate Communicator. And I am here with Janine Bolon. And I just told her before this, I go, you are amazing. And she goes, why? And I'm like, okay, really? Like this book and this book and this, like, do you really want to know why you're amazing?
Well, I was just holding up yours. I was like, oh, and don't forget to buy them because, I have copies myself.
So for everybody out there, first of all, my books are free on Kindle all day long. If you would like to download them, please go ahead and do so and check them out. And Janine, if you could share with us, you have some great things in here on saving money, ditching debt, grocery store tips. I actually have already started really going through these going, this is some amazingly useful stuff to the everyday person. If you could share with us a bit about what inspired your books, and then a little bit about, I have 3 of them. So I have Ditching Debt, The Grocery Store, and Cash, Cars, and College, which I love the alliteration.
I had fun with that one. Well, what really started all of this was my students. I'm actually an analytical biochemist by training. I specialize in automation and robotics. Back in the dark ages when we were using RS-232 cables and Wi-Fi hadn't been invented yet. So that's kind of my old school ways. And so I moved out of corporate America and moved into academic teaching. I love teaching math and physics to non-majors because I wanted to be very practical for them. And so that's where a lot of the tips came from. My folks, my students, I noticed around finals, their grades were starting to drop. The longer we went through the semester, the grades were starting to drop. And I knew the content was getting a little heavier, but I also knew that something was weird. I found out it was because they were running out of money, that nobody had really taught them well. It was a period of time between 1996 and 2005 that I was noticing this trend with my students. And so I was put in charge of financial money management. Why? Well, behind doors and in private coffee breaks with the rest of the staff, I had been coaching the staff at the college I was working at, and had taught them how to handle their money. So it's the 60-40 principle is what it is. And it was literally because of my students. They were the ones that begged me to write a book. And back then, just remember to kind of give a little idea, I know it was 15 years ago, but at that time, to publish your own book, you were vanity publishing. Remember that term? It was like you were like, oh, you were so egotistical and arrogant and narcissistic. I mean, all these words were around if you couldn't get a publisher to publish your book. And so I was running to Kinko's. Remember them? Running to Kinko's every time to copy my book for my students. And it was just really one of those times where I finally went, okay, I don't care what it's called. I don't care what happens to my reputation. I'm just going to self-publish this book and get it to my students. And within 2 years, I had sold 7,000 copies. And that was before the internet is what it is today. And I continue to sell. It continues to sell because the principles are timeless with the 60-40 principles. So that gives you a little bit of history.
Can you go into the principle a bit?
Oh, sure. Real fast. I have videos everywhere. You can go to my website to look at this up. But the quick version is the 60-40 principle is a contract with the universe. And remember, this was before The Secret came out. So I was happy to talk to people about the law of attraction, but be very secular and not use the word universe too much or what have you. So I would talk about how that there is a process where you can go about getting money to attract to you. The 60-40 principle is a contract where eventually the idea, the star in the sky, if you will, is the thing that you're aiming for is that you will eventually live on only 60% of your income. And then you divide up 10%, 10%, 10%, 10%, around that 5-pointed star. 20% goes into savings, 20% you give away. And there's a whole process I do with that. And you can do it on your current income. So it doesn't even matter how much debt you have. You still can pay down your debt, increase your savings, and still have money enough to buy a pizza every once in a while from Uber or whatever your pizza delivery service is right now.
Yeah, definitely. takeout has changed over the past few months, and things have really been different. And it's part of why I decided 24 authors in 12 hours. We cannot go out right now to the book festivals and touch these books, and it's really kind of changed things. So instead, we're having this. So I really like this little book you have here. It is
Oh,
Ditching Debt. And so can you talk about this book a little bit for us?
right. Okay. Well, the original book was called Money, It's Not Just for Rich People. So that was the original book. That's the one that my students got and all that. Well, my students were trying to teach their family, and my students ended up having children of their own, and they wanted a little pamphlet. So this is before you were allowed to self-publish a 5x7 book. Okay. So you were stuck in this, 6x9 framework. And so with the Ditching Debt, this was the little gift book that my students could buy for $10, and they could pass it around to their family as Christmas gifts and stuff like that. And it's the stripped down skeleton, just the bones of the 60/40 principle. But if you really want to learn about it and work with it, I highly recommend Money. It's Not Just for Rich People. Just depends on what you want to do.
Okay, and then you have the grocery store, and it's got this neat little spiral binder, and a lot of that is because when you look at it, you have all these little worksheets, and I love worksheets. I'm very old school. I love anything that you can fill in with like a pencil or a crayon or whatever. So let's talk about this a little bit at the grocery store. And we are all, even how we go to the grocery store has changed a lot.
Mhm. The principles have not. Okay, so the tip sheets and everything that are available with the grocery store game, it's actually an online course that I now offer, and I've got about 48 students at any one time that are running through the course. The thing with the grocery store game is, please remember, Kindle hadn't come out yet, and we didn't have tablets. And I had students that would say, look, Janine, unless you create a workbook for this grocery store game, which, by the way, that there's a whole section and a whole chapter in Money. It's Not Just for Rich People. And they were like, I am not a do-it-yourselfer. Unless you print the workbook, I'm not doing it. So I had to find yet another publisher and get a spiral bound book and all that. So it was for what people would take into the grocery store with them to use the system of the grocery store game. So I actually you'll see a couple of 1-star reviews on Amazon with it, because people are now at, 2020, and they're like, oh my God, I bought this book and it's just full of, templates. And I was like, Amazon was different. We couldn't specify. So I'm desperately trying to go back and retrofit, but that's why you've got probably only 40 pages of text. The rest is worksheets, and that's just because my students were driving that as well.
Yeah, and back in the modern day now, you can put the templates online. So do you have the templates online for people, or?
It's all part of the course. The course is, I can't even remember the price now. I don't want to say it, but if you go to the 8gates.com/courses, you'll see the grocery store game, or you're welcome to email me at Janine Bolon. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. You'll find me. Just go to find Janine Bolon. You'll see me somewhere and contact me, and my executive assistant will help you. Yeah.
Yeah, you have so many different things going on, Janine. So besides being an author of multiple books, can you tell us a little bit about your podcasts?
Okay, so currently I just finished publishing, actually, it went live today, was the Thriving Solopreneur. So I now have 10 books that I have published, and I'm a single mom, and I have 4 kids, of which 3 are still living with me at home, and I have 4 podcast shows. So I am highly engaged. So it keeps me busy. And you, as a program manager, that's why I loved your book. I loved reading it, because I was like, oh, nice to know I'm on track. Nice to know that I see my life as literally one project after another. So have to give a shout out to your book. It's wonderfully written.
Thank you so much.
You bet. But as far as the podcasts I have, it was all meant as far as service. When I've been in radio since 1987. Back in high school, I was part of KDFN, KOEA-FM, serving the current River Valley with information, entertainment. So, I've been on radio a long time. And podcasting just gives me so much freedom to kind of do it the way I want. I don't have have to worry about commercials. If I want sponsors, I can. And the 4 podcasts, I have 3-minute money tips. And that, of course, is driven for the people that don't have a lot of time, but they do have 3 minutes for me to give them a tip of some kind to help them with their financial situation. And then we have the Writer's Hour, which is one that you're getting ready to come on. I can't wait for you. We're going to have you probably in January or February of next year. Come on. But the Writer's Hour is basically to help self-published authors as well as published authors, but it's to give a platform so that we can see the story behind the story. I love books that authors write, but I also know the story that is just hysterical is how they actually wrote the book. So that's the Writer's Hour. And then the 4th one is the Practical Mystic Show. I got in with a group of Native Americans, and there were 16 different tribes. And I found myself in a world of mysticism, and it was just so beautiful the way they walk the medicine wheel and stuff like that. And because I was raised in Japan, I was used to walking wheels, but they called them different things. And so it was kind of East and West came together. So the Practical Mystic Show is ordinary people who have extraordinary gifts. And we bring them on and we talk about their gifts, and so that other people that have those sorts of gifts don't feel like they're alone. And then the last one and the most recent one is the Thriving Solopreneur. With so many people having lost their job and having to find new income streams, the Thriving Solopreneur is where I bring on successful people who started off on a bootstrapping budget due to some sort of crisis that wasn't related to 2020. And we talked to them about what they needed to do, the systems, the processes, and what advice would they give their older self, now that they're their future self, if they had that. So we basically, it's a coaching program for young business people. And you can be 72 and running your own business. It's not age determinate.
So I asked you this before, and I was like, oh, solopreneur. I have no idea what that is, but I'm just intrigued and want to know more. Can you share with our audience exactly what does that mean? Because it's very different than actually an entrepreneur.
Correct. There is some debate on the term, so I'm going to give you flavors. One flavor of the term is that you can be a solopreneur while working for someone else. And this means you're creating a brand, you're creating an expertise while you're in the employ of a corporation without doing anything that will hurt your intellectual property that you have versus what the company has. So it's basically building a name for yourself or some sort of notoriety or to be noted. Notoriety is the wrong word.
Perhaps your brand.
Yeah, the opposite one. Yeah. And so a solopreneur can be that. My particular definition is you get into a business that you don't want to expand to the point that you have to hire other people. You're doing it either out of a sense of passion, out of a sense that you really just want it to stay in-house or stay in the family. And then after 7 years, you do grow. And this is the thing about solopreneurs. You start off thinking it's just going to be you. You're just creating systems for you. But about the 7-year mark is when a solopreneur goes, I'm going to have to expand. And then that's when they pop over to an entrepreneur.
Now, that's really interesting. And I've had a few friends who went and they've transitioned from that point. And, in so many ways, the modern digital economy that we're in is great because things that you would have had to hire people for, you can outsource. Places like Fiverr have great resources that you can use and things like that. And so it's really just a kind of different environment that we're in now. With, like you said, back when you wrote the grocery store book, and you've got all these great little workbooks in here. But now people are like, I can just download it. Like, where's your app? What do you want to do? And next thing you know, you're like, oh, I need an app developer. Like, who knew that was going to be something I need, right?
Right.
So it's all just kind of interesting. Right now, like during COVID, it is definitely some different times. But as a professional podcaster, you've kind of been in this digital environment for a long time, like you said, 1987 when you first started in radio. What is your advice to those who are just coming out into this area?
Do you mean podcasting specifically?
Podcasting, broadcasting themselves, having to use digital medium like we're using now to share like their products, their books. The authors who are out there who are like, I was planning on going to the local coffee shop and signing all my books to people, or I was planning on doing a big stage event, and all these things have kind of dissipated. Several of the authors today, it's been a bit heartbreaking, who had different businesses as keynotes, or one of them was in hospitality and all these kinds of things where they had contracts went away. So what's your advice on how do you market and how do you do these broadcasts?
Okay. Well, just to add to it, in Q1 of this year, I lost $28,000 in contracts and keynote addresses because I'm also a speaker, as you would probably fathom. So, yes, I'm right there with them. So, when I saw what was happening and I was watching the devastation around me, I was like, I got to get busy. I got to figure this out. And so I immediately sifted it so that people that had already sold tickets or what have you, I did a lot of stuff for free during Q2, dropped a lot of my rates. I was trying to help people because I've been doing this money gig for so many decades that I knew I could really serve them and get them out of whatever financial crisis they were in. And that's kind of where they started calling me the financial first responder, which is because I was like, let's do it for free. You've already paid for an event. You can't get your money back from the hotel. I'll still be a speaker for you. And so we were moving everything to Zoom. So the biggest advice I can give to other folks who are just getting into this sphere is go slow. Take your time. Take the tutorials. There are so many wonderful millennials and people like myself who have spent hours and hours building videos for you. So go to YouTube and type in how do I and whatever it is you need to learn. Somebody has already figured it out for you and they'll be happy to tell you. Even if it is like your dryer is tumbling, but the dryer element is not working, there's a sweet man that's in Pennsylvania that has a video just for you. And I was able to fix my dryer in the midst of all this insanity that was going on because he did a video for it. So that's the first one. Use YouTube. Everybody complains about there's nothing but junk on YouTube. I'm like, well, it depends on what you're searching. If you're searching how to do something, it is a gold mine of wonderful, philanthropic, excellent people. They're out there trying to help you. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is if you don't like Zoom, if it's not intuitive for you, then look up other platforms. There are plenty to choose from. The thing is, find the one that works with your personality and then go slow. Take every single tutorial, learn the software inside and out, and then get yourself a nice little headset. I'm using a headset. I've used headsets since I was 14 because I always have a lot of noise going on in my environment. And even with the jackhammers that are currently going on as they're renovating the sidewalk out front of my house, you don't hear it because of the way the mic is set up. So get yourself something inexpensive. By the way, these headsets, $40. Everybody may try to tell you that in podcasting, you need to have $180 to $250 microphones and special studios and setups. I paid $60 to start podcasting. I bought a $20 ring light so that my face would be illuminated so that my children would know I was recording, not the video. It was the signal, those crazy, wonderful people in my life that mom was recording now. So maybe we want to be quiet and not start running the dryer. The other one was,
but the dryer works now. So that's
my dryer works. Let me tell you, that sucker dries. It's great. Most people would be like, why don't you hang your laundry? I said, have you ever hung the laundry of 6 people in an estate like I have? Yeah. So anyway, it's just fun and games. But so those are some of the tips is go slow, watch every tutorial that your particular platform has offered to you because of, and this is one of the beautiful things about 2020, because of the shutdowns, because of all these things changing, well-meaning, gifted, very sincere people have spent hours making sure you succeed.
Now that is some really, really great advice. And what's interesting is on your whole use YouTube is I went to YouTube and I was looking up authors, how to market your book during COVID, right?
Right.
And a couple well-meaning young kids were like, get other authors and just start doing an event and then have those other authors and you all cross-pollinate your books. And I thought, well, that's a great idea. And then I contacted a couple powerhouses in my life and they're like, no, it's going to be way bigger than anything you imagine. I imagine it'd be 2 or 3 authors. The next thing you know, it's 24. And I actually have the next event planned out on November 11th. So for people who can join, it's going to be another marathon session. But what I've really discovered from it is in the author community, there's so many who are out there who are in this point of struggling where they're like, I was planning this launch, I was planning to do this, I was planning to do that. So you really talk a lot about finances, and finances really changes your life, because if you don't have money, things are very hard. And I always say money may not solve your problems, but it does make your problems easier.
Yeah.
And so you just have such an eclectic background, and I've kind of read through, and I'm like, how did she go from this line to this line to this line? What's your advice on people on nonlinear careers?
Nonlinear careers, you're going to need to be a little bit more specific for my personality type. So help me out here, dear.
So you go into a certain field, and this kind of very engineering, very analytical, like where you're like, I'm in business and this is what I do. And then you're an academic, and then you're like a podcaster, and you're like a book writer. Like these things, a lot of people are like, I'm going to work the 9 to 5 and this is my lifestyle. And then as I go through these things, you're like, oh, this is not where I thought I was going to be in the beginning. So you've kind of went with it. You said, oh, I started doing this because my students needed it. And you've just expanded and continued.
Mhm.
What's your advice on people who are afraid to go beyond that kind of 9 to 5?
Right. I actually encourage folks who are afraid to go past that to get an MLM, multi-level marketing something or other, network marketing something or other, and make sure that it is with a product or service that you absolutely adore and use it consistently in your own life. So in my case, I started off as a 17-year-old with Mary Kay. I didn't wear a stitch of makeup. I had no desire for that, but I absolutely loved the products and I loved the skincare system. And so that's what I sold. I really wasn't into the lipsticks and nails and all that kind of stuff, but I was into a professional look. Because remember, I was back in the 80s and 90s, and unless you wore makeup, you weren't considered a professional woman. So, things have definitely changed and I love it. So that's how I started. So that was my first quote, quote, MLM, even though technically Mary Kay is not. But I got into Mary Kay Cosmetics, and that helped me understand how to run a business. And so now I find myself, I've always had a side hack, I've always had a side gig. And one of the things that I do now is send out cards, and that's an MLM. But I have a huge team now because of COVID, because of the shutdowns and everything. And one of the things I found was the 9 to 5ers had no idea how to run a business, but yet here they were trusting me to help them become profitable with their MLM. And so that's one of the things. That's the reason for the Thriving Solopreneur. That's the latest book, was basically to help 9 to 5ers move and make the transition by not quitting your job, but doing a side job that would take you 8 hours a week. And most people, if they're honest with themselves, they can break up that 8 hours. Now, when I first started my MLM, I was working 50 hours a week at my day job, my so-called what I do for a living, authoring and courses and financial advice, right? But then for Saturdays, that was the only day that I had to work. And I only had 4 hours. So if I got up at 6 a.m., I'd work 6 hours technically until noon, when my teenagers would start to rouse themselves out of bed, right? So this was the only time that I had. I was alone in the house for all intents and purposes. And so that was what I did with those 6 hours or 5 hours that I had. So that's where I came up with the 4-hour work week, was how you go about building a business when you only have very segmented or very small amounts of time.
No, that's some great advice. And most of the authors I've had so far have either had grown children or don't have children. But you're doing this with, like you said, there's 6 people in your house and you
Yeah.
have 4 children. So what's your advice for parents who are home right now during this pandemic with their kids home on lockdown and they're having to work from the house?
Well, it's challenging if you've never done it before. So, my biggest advice that I give to people who are homeschooling, see, I homeschooled my children until they got to high school age, and then they chose whether they wanted to continue homeschooling or if they wanted to go into some sort of high school. And every single one of them took a different path. So, that's a fine. But if you've never homeschooled and you've never had to work from home, it is a huge learning curve. And so my single best piece of advice is give yourself a break. Stop expecting the bar to be up here. Stop expecting yourself to be able to run at 100% efficiency or 80% efficiency. You're going to be in the 30 to 40% efficiency for a very long time because of the learning curves. You have to totally alter your systems, and all those breaks that you did have. I even encourage some of the women to go a little bit through the grieving process of they lost their time. And this is no, I'm not busting on the men in the world, because God knows they have their own challenges. But for women, it's like we have so little time that's ours. We watched it evaporate in 2020 by the sheer need. Now, some of the men in my life have even said they watched any time they had just evaporate as well. So as we're dealing with this, remember, there's an element of grief that you may want to walk through and kind of investigate a little bit. And then when you acknowledge that, it makes it ever so much easier to get back on that learning curve, especially when you find yourself getting really frustrated. Stop, take a breath, realize you cannot, it's impossible for you to operate the way you used to. You've got to really forget the past and realize this is where I am today. And most people talk about a new normal. I go, no, 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 no. I don't want this to be normal, but I do say, this is where I am now. I always keep it focused in my moment. Yeah.
Now, I think that's really important, that whole concept of like living in the present. And I love that concept that you just said about letting yourself grieve. So often we're taught like you have to put on that Disney face, and I'm just going to be happy no matter what. And
I'm not good at the Disney face. I got the ears, but that's about it.
Oh, I love that. We're getting close to the end of the episode, and I'm going to have to wrap it up now. Is there anything that you want to share with the audience that I haven't asked you about yet, or that you feel like, hey, this is something critical that I wish I would have mentioned earlier?
I think the biggest thing is please connect with me on LinkedIn so that I can start guiding you on how to use that platform to become a bit more profitable in whatever business you're running. The other thing is connect with me, period. I have a lot of free stuff that I built during the Q2, during the second quarter of this year, because of the amount of people that were in need. So reach out to me in whatever format is easiest for you and get connected with me so that we can definitely get you free resources so we can start building the life that you want as opposed to where you find yourself now.
Now, I think that's super great. We had an author earlier who was talking about, have your plan B. This is the title of his book. What's your plan B? He corrected me because I want to use the grammatically correct is, right? And so what's your plan B? And I think it's such an important thing. And so much of the solopreneur and having multiple streams of revenue, which goes into so much of your financial advice, is just critical for people today. And, if you have those nest eggs, if you have those backup plans, and I think COVID has really just shown a lot of people that no matter how secure you think you are, that life changes. And even people who, were fortunate enough that they could come home and start teleworking, that suddenly when you're teleworking with 3 or 4 kids in a house, it changes everything. And it's a whole new world out there. So, Janine, just thank you for your time. This has just been such a joy. And this half hour has just flown by.
It was definitely a delight. And my dad was military. So when you started talking about in your book the the traits of the community, I was like, oh my gosh, I know exactly the person you were talking about. So it was lovely to connect with you in that way.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And thank you to our audience today.